Yeah, anybody want to start asking questions or have anything?
There's one.
Yeah, I was at the original Woodstock, and I saw Janice play, and it was fantastic. It was like studio.
Wow.
And,
We heard just the opposite. That she was really stoned. She had a tough time singing. But that's just what, and we weren't there.
I was not covered in mud. I was not stoned.
I think a lot of people that were there, that were in a particular kind of condition, really loved the show. You know, so.
Right after she played, she stepped off stage. The whole
Right after she quit, she stepped off
And
stage.
Creedence Clearwater came on,
Yeah.
and they dropped a top, and it was a projection of Janice's previous performance.
I'm not sure if I understood. They dropped a what?
A tarp.
A tarp.
Janice played, and Holding Company played.
No, you didn't play. It was a Cosmic Blues Band. You were not there.
I was there.
We were. We know that.
We always have people telling us that saw us at places that we didn't play. One of the big ones that we always get a lot is people say, well, we saw you at the Human Being, which was in early 1967 at the beginning of the Summer of Love. And we weren't there. We were actually playing in LA. But over the years, so many people actually saw us there. So, yeah.
Well, forgive me then,
Okay.
but I saw Janice perform.
Good.
After she left the stage with her group, what's your question? Dropped down, and out came Creedence
Okay.
Clearwater.
Someone just asked, what's the question?
Well, the question was that film on the top the actual performance of Janice 5 minutes before?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Anyway, it was.
All right, here's another question over here. This man here with the white hair.
How you guys doing? Did you stay in music?
Yeah.
Tell us about your careers.
We continually play music, but not as much. It's a little bit harder for us, you know, getting older, and flying on airplanes is not easy anymore. And it was fun when we were kids. I used to hang out with the stewardesses, they called them, and tell them jokes and stories, and even have them sometimes come to the gigs. You know, and flying was really a lot easier. There was no TSA, you know, there wasn't a lot of this, you know, stuff. I just, it's tough. But it's also difficult to get gigs. I mean, there's, the audiences, I mean, are younger audiences, and they go for the younger bands. So we rely on people like you to come out to shows.
But you're playing tomorrow, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I
Yeah.
hope you're going to make a return visit to this theater. Here's one over here.
So, you say in the movie that you were primitive musicians, that you were primitive, you were self-taught. I mean, was that the environment in San Francisco at the time, that a lot of the bands were, you know, just picked up an instrument and taught themselves? And did that help sort of Janice become much more sort of guttural and, you know, powerful?
Okay, the primitive aspect of the bands in the 60s. Now, what's the last part there?
Well, did that help Janice become more sort of, you know, I mean, she was a being. I saw her at the Albert Hall, and she was just a being. I mean, did that come out of Big Brother, or was that herself?
Well, she wasn't really a primitive singer. But she was a folk music, you know, person. You know, came from the folk scene and the blues scene from Texas. Did we encourage her to be more of a kind of outlandish performer, or let's say more demonstrative? Yes, because she played loud. She had to sing over us. It was not easy.
So when Janice joined the band, when she first joined the band, she was a very good folk singer, and she had a lot of success. I think that's in the movie. She was singing in folk, coffee houses and places in North Beach in the early 60s. And she actually, people knew of her and were blown away by her singing in that style. When she came with Big Brother, for a while she tried to kind of adjust her volume and sing in that same way, and kind of, it was a little bit more shrieky. And I think she started to really listen in the time she was in Big Brother, in late 1966 and into 1967, she started to listen to more rhythm and blues and soul kind of music. And really, she would actually work at it. She would sometimes, walk around singing like riffs that she heard, and she was absorbing that kind of style and becoming much more, I don't know, we use the word professional, but much more skillful as a singer with more. She had, in the beginning, when she first came in, and Peter remembers this, because she had 2 or 3 different voices. She had a Bessie Smith voice, but then she also had a Joan Baez voice that very rarely she would show to people. But she had a couple of songs that she wrote that were in that style, but very lyrical and almost like ballads. And those kind of disappeared completely when she as she became more into rhythm and blues and soul, I think.
And the reason why she left Big Brother was because she supposedly wanted to get into a big soul band, or have a big soul band with horns and everything. And some people liked that sort of thing, and that was the band that worked at Woodstock. Other people thought that she was mimicking or not really, doing something that was herself. And I believe the last band that she was with, the Full Tilt Boogie Band, as you can see in the movie, was really a great band to back her up. It was like kind of a combination of Big Brother and some soul band type of thing. But she became, like you're saying, much more of a demonstrative character on stage, and really could get the audience going. I mean, this movie shows that last part of her, particularly that last song. Yeah, anybody else? One over here.
Way back there. Okay, let's go. How old was she? Could you talk really loud?
How old was she when she passed away?
Oh, she's part of the 27 group, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, all 27.
No, she was 27 when she passed away?
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, let's go back here.
2 questions. How much live, whether video film footage exists of Janice that it hasn't been made public, you guys know? And another one is she did Ball and Chain at Monterey. You guys had obviously rehearsed and everything. Do you guys have an inkling that she was going to perform?
Okay, two questions. One, Dave, about Ball and Chain and footage of Janice, yeah.
Video.
Amy Berg really got almost everything that's out there. She really did a fantastic job of getting people to give her footage that they never gave to anybody else. Like the thing when they were on the train in Canada, and her singing Bobby McGee. And I don't think none of us had ever seen that ever
Until this movie
before
came out.
Amy found it. And there was other things, even when I'm just standing there for 10 minutes tonight, there were things that, John Cook had footage also. He spoke at the end, but he did a lot of filming for Penny Baker when we first met him, or at the Monterey Pop Festival. He was a camera operator for Penny Baker at the Monterey Pop Festival, and then he became our road manager. So when he traveled with us, he took, Super 8 movies, and she got a lot of that, which no one had ever seen before. So there was a lot of footage, but I think she pretty much got everything. Every once in a while I hear a rumor that someone has something in the park that was taken in 1966 in Golden Gate Park, but it has no sound. It's just, you know, someone with a camera.
We have, well, no, not we anymore, I don't think. It was a video called Ball and Chain, but it's a complete TV show done on a public television station called KQED. And you can find that, well, Rhino, I think, eventually put it out. So you can find that online, probably on Amazon. Way in the back there with the hat.
Yeah, hi. I got two questions. One was, what was the feeling when she left Big Brother and Sam and Andrew went along with it to the Cosmic Blues Band? And did you stay close to her, even though with the breakup and everything up to her death? And number two was, my brother was at, supposedly, I don't know if it ever was true, but the last concert she played was at Harvard Stadium. My brother was there, and then she went back to San Francisco, and ultimately what happened. Is that the truth? And then the first question.
Okay, can you
Sam,
talk about her leaving the band and how you felt about it? And then Harvard?
Yeah, and then the last question, was that her last concert at Cambridge?
It was.
It was at Harvard
It was.
Stadium.
Yeah, but we weren't residents of it.
Okay.
When Janice announced that she was leaving the band, which was in probably late August, early September of 1968, we did one more tour. We actually went out on the road then, and we played till the end of November, almost constantly. I don't know how many gigs we did, but we just were on the road because we were trying to get as much out of it as we could before she left the band. After she left the band, and then she formed not the Full Tilt Boogie Band, but the Cosmic Blues Band. That didn't work. That didn't last a long time. And then when that band broke up, when she broke up that band, and between the time that she was starting her other band, we did a show together. Bill Graham asked us to play at what was called the Fillmore West, and he basically hired us, and he hired Janice separately and put us together, and we did like a reunion. And that was the last time we played with her.
How'd you feel?
Actually, that was the actual last time.
Did you guys stay close up until her death, or after that we?
Did you stay close to her after her death?
Yeah, in fact, I saw her, I'm going to correct what I just said, because actually, I'm thinking it was 1970, it was the summer of 1970. Again, she wanted us to open for her. She was playing in San Diego. And so, it's kind of a little story with that, because we had played a gig with her like about 6 months before, and it didn't work out so well for her. She had just started the band, and she got very drunk, and she got into a fight with somebody, and it was like her band wasn't together. And we had a very good band, Big Brother did, so she wanted to sort of like get, I don't know, call it revenge, but she wanted to even the score. And so she asked us to open for her in San Diego. And this was after the Full Tilt Boogie Band was together about 4 or 5 months maybe. And they were pretty great. They were really tight. And we opened for her in San Diego, and it was a great show. And on the way back from San Diego, I rode with her. I sat next to her on the plane, and we talked. And that was the last time I saw her. I don't know about Peter.
Yeah.
But that was, and she said she was clean. It was a real big thing, because she was telling me how she was clean for like 4 weeks. She'd been clean, and that was like, she was very proud of that. And the other thing I remember from it was that she wanted all of her friends to start calling her Pearl, which nobody did except people that,
You thought that was
were
pretty
her entourage.
stupid. Yeah.
But none of the old friends of hers, we all said, fuck that, Call
That
her
was
Pearl.
the name that she was going to have when she had her own bar, Pearls, probably in some place in Alaska or the Yukon. Anyway, you had a question about Ball and Chain. I don't think we answered it. What's that question again? He can't hear you, so I'll answer it.
Did you guys, in your practices, your rehearsals with her, did you have any idea that she was going to burn the stage up the way she did?
Yeah, because we had played that song many times, and You know, we were limited to 4 songs at Monterey. So that was one of the 4 songs.
Actually, 5 in the first one.
Well, yeah, 5 in the first one. With a song called Harry, which lasted about 1 minute. And it's not, and that song, Harry, was supposed to be on Cheap Thrills. You'll notice the cover of Cheap Thrills, there's a little guy with a turban on, and it says Art by Art Crumb. Well, it's supposed to say Harry Kirshner. That was the name of the song, and Clive Davis hated that song. It was one of Dave's songs. We cannot blame it on him. It's kind of crazy.
We sometimes used to open a set with it, and it was 1 minute long, and it was just this really freaky thing, which was great because it kind of was one of the things that people don't, well, the thing about Janice is, and Big Brother was really all over. We did a lot of different stuff, and Janice was always kind of willing to go with that. Like, so we had this song, Harry, which was almost like I don't know what you call it, I wrote it. It was like a free jazz,
Kind of
Frank Zappa kind of 1 minute long freak out. And Janice loved it, and at the end of it she would say, Harry, Harry, come home. And, you know, and it was supposed to open the second side of Cheap Thrills, and Clive Davis said, no, not going to open the second side of Cheap Thrills. So they changed the artwork. They took Art Crumb's caption that he'd already done for that song and put his name in there, and he freaked out. He really was very upset by that because no one had ever changed his artwork without his consent. And he didn't do commercial artwork. He didn't work for other people. He did his art for himself. So he said after that, I don't think he took the money. He was supposed to get $600. And I've talked to him since then. He doesn't remember whether ever he took it, but I remember that he didn't. He didn't accept the money, and he said he would never do another album cover again, which actually turned out to not be true, because he did one for his own band, the Cheap Suit Serenaders.
Okay, and whatever happened to the artwork? That's the question.
This is another a long story. The artwork was, eventually we were in our lawyer's office a couple of years, maybe about a year or so after Janice died. And we asked what had happened to the artwork because Crumb had never gotten it back. He didn't want it back changed. It was like he was insulted, deeply insulted by it. And so they went looking for it. The guy who was the art director at Columbia at that time was a guy named Bob Cato, and he went back and he looked for it, and then he called us back and he said, I can't find it. It's gone. So years went by, and in I think it was 84, it was sometime in the 80s, it showed up at an auction at Sotheby's, and it sold for about $25,000 at an auction at Sotheby's. And we took out a lawsuit against Sotheby's because we said it was stolen and that we actually, it was a work for hire, and if anybody was going to get it, we wanted to get it. So anyway, long story short, we did win the lawsuit with Sotheby's, and someone got we got some money from Sotheby's, not enough to pay our lawyers. And someone had it, and then about 10, 12 years after that.
You got to say how he got it. This guy who auctioned it off of Sotheby's said that he got the artwork from Janice in the back of a cab.
Yeah. He said he met Janice in an office of a teen magazine, and they shared a cab together downtown, and she liked his work so much that she said, I'm giving you this cover for Cheap Thrills, which is
We don't
just
think
absurd.
that ever happened.
But because she has a reputation, being an alcoholic and a drug addict, Sotheby's could say something, their lawyers could say something like that and have it hold up in court. And everybody who knew Janice knew that wasn't true. But anyway, the bottom line of the story is that it was auctioned again, 15 years ago at Sotheby's, and it was sold for $250,000. And the person who owns it now is Nick Parker, who is the CEO of Nike, and it's in his office. That's where Cheap Thrills is.
Here's a question over here.
On a personal level, you guys were all in your 20s. Did Janice talk with you about her childhood and what it was like growing up and what it was like not having a boyfriend while all you guys went off with the
Yeah, it's about her childhood. Yeah, she did mention that to us, how she grew up and how she was, you know, maligned, I guess, or there was a lot of prejudice towards her because she liked black people, and we didn't do that very much in Texas. She even dated black people. Ooh, that was a no-no in Port Arthur. So she had a tough time in high school. She was an artist and did a little bit of singing in high school, but a little bit later on, after high school, she did a lot more singing. And she just became one of the outsiders in that area of Texas. And then, of course, she was in Austin, Texas, too. She went to school there for a short while and hung around with a lot of people who were like her own people. So she had a tough time, though, growing up. And she mentioned that to us, and I think that she overcompensated. That's my opinion. Anyway, another question? Right here.
I did have a question. So you guys were basically the rhythm section in the band, right? Bass and drums.
Yeah.
You know, the drug culture was heavy. Obviously, there are people in the band doing drugs, but I mean, you're awfully tight band. You couldn't have been that tore down, or am I wrong? I mean, for the big shows, were you guys out of it all the time? Didn't
No.
sound like it.
No. Most of the time, you know, the drug use and alcohol was after the gigs, you know, and it was kind of understood. Occasionally, somebody would do or smoke a little bit of weed before the show. Yeah.
It sounded like it, and also great, very gospel-y backup vocals
Oh, thanks.
from a lot of you guys.
We tried to sing our best, you
Yeah.
know, behind Janice. It was not real easy, but she, you know, someone asked me a question one time. Said, "Well, did Janice affect you musically?" And anytime a musician is working with someone who's a little bit above them in their level, you try to get up to that level, and that's kind of like what we did. So she kind of improved us in a way, or we improved ourselves when she joined the band. Although just recently, Stanley Miller, said that one of his favorite bands was Big Brother and the Holy Company. They were the best band in San Francisco before the chick came. But we worked we rehearsed in his studios. It was prejudiced on his part.
One of the things about Big Brother in the beginning was that all of us were really like kind of going for it in a way that was, you know, over the top in a certain sense, or, you know, or really attempting something that was almost over our heads or beyond our skill level. Particularly, I think, James Gurley, our lead guitarist, who was the featured soloist, really the featured player in the band before Janice, was really like that. He was really going for something really out there, really attempting something where you could really hate it. You could say, you know, really fall on his face, or people really thought, he's amazing. He's just a phenomenon. And I think Janice got that from Big Brother. When she joined Big Brother, she knew she was going to have to, in some way, go to another level in terms of going for it, taking herself out of herself and achieving something beyond what she did before. At the same time, what Peter says is really true, that she was much faster than the rest of us. She was really so talented that she started really improving, fast. And she pulled us along too, because when you play with musicians that are as good or better than you, you have to be better. You have to go beyond yourself. And she did that for the band. But we also gave her something. We gave her an arena in some way to develop what she became, that she wouldn't have if she hadn't been in Big Brother. If she had just gone into a regular blues band, let's say, of good musicians, I don't think that would have happened. I don't think she would have developed the style she did.
And a lot of people have asked us, well, when Janice told you that she was leaving and she wanted to have a horn band, would you guys, add an organ player and a couple of horns? And I just don't think so. I think she knew that we wouldn't do that, and she wanted that. So that's one of the reasons why she left. Another question, I just saw someone's hand go up. Yeah.
So I went through 3 copies of Cheap Thrills when I was
Three
in high
copies
school.
you did of Cheap Thrills. You went through 3 copies of Cheap Thrills.
And I played in a band in high school with a girl singer, and we played all the tunes, and it was my favorite album. I'd fall asleep to it What does combination of the two mean?
Well, combination of the
We're
two.
gonna play it tomorrow night.
Oh.
Yeah, but it basically is a song written by Sam Andrew about the Fillmore Auditorium and the family dog at the Avalon Ballroom. But it also could be a lot of things that always seems to wind up with this band. A couple of things always seem to happen. You know, it's a combination of two, sometimes three or four things. But it's just a song mostly about the ballroom scene in San Francisco, and it basically, you know, the same audience would come to both those places and have a good time, a lot of dancing. But you know, Janice sometimes had her opinions, strong opinions about the Fillmore that would cause problems with her even getting in. We would always get in for free of these things, you know. You just walk up the stairs at the Fillmore, at the Avalon, and I said, come on in, you know, you play here all the time. Well, Janice one time did something in an interview about the Fillmore being a place where sailors go to meet girls. And she was rounded. We're getting late, you know. And so when she went to the Fillmore, and Bill Graham was up on the stairs, you know, she's walking up. He said, "You can't come in here. What are you talking about?" You know, you read the article. We didn't think he was going to read it. And so she was thrown out.
The combination of the two was like the two places, the Avalon and the Fillmore. And Sam used that expression a lot. We would, you know, talk about things like that, and sometimes at the end of the discussion we would say, oh, well, it's a combination of the two. In the case of the Fillmore and the Avalon, the guy who ran the Avalon, who was our original manager, and in some ways he was like the original Big Brother, was a guy named Chet Helms. And Chet was like a very philosophical, kind of head in the clouds kind of guy. He was a terrible businessman, but he was very idealistic, and he really felt that what he was doing and creating, putting on the dances and promoting it was part of a cultural revolution, and he really believed in that. And Bill Grimm, on the other hand, in the beginning anyway, in the first couple of years that Bill Grimm was in business, I think he saw it as an opportunity, as a business opportunity, and he didn't know really what the music was about. He didn't know what the posters were about. He gradually, I mean, he was actually dosed with acid a couple of times by the Grateful Dead. I think that changed things a lot. But gradually Bill, you know, became close to the music and loved some of the music, loved some of the bands, and you know, hired some great poster artists. But in the beginning, he was very much about business, and we had a lot of conflicts with him. He would try to get us for nothing. He would try to get us to play the cheapest possible price that he could always get us for. And for a long time, he wouldn't even hire us as a band until after Monterey, because then he had to hire us. He basically knew that we were that much of a draw that he wanted us at the Fillmore. But anyway, the two things were very necessary for that scene to happen. You had to have a guy like Chet on one side and the Avalon on a certain side, and you had to have the Fillmore, because Bill could really do it. He could really make it sustain itself as a business and bring in really great acts to play, you know, because he had that great business sense, and he was, you know, he really was a businessman. Chet was not a businessman, and he ultimately went under.
But he did have partners, so it wasn't just him. There was a couple other people that were involved with the family dog. But with the Fillmore, it was just Bill primarily. He did have some good people who worked for him. Yeah.
I'm curious about a trip you guys took in the early days to Chicago. I guess that's where you did the...
Well, Dave has been doing a memoir or a blog about Chicago. You want to tell him?
About what?
Chicago.
Yeah. You could, I don't want to tell you too much about it, but it's called Mother Blues. And that was the name of the club that we played at. We went right after Janice joined the band in June of 1966, we all moved together into a house in the country, out in about 25, 30 miles from San Francisco, a little town called Lagunitas. And we were only there a short time, and then we got this offer to go to Chicago and play in this club, basically a blues club, for a month, which was, you know, really unusual even at that time to be booked for that long. But the Jefferson Airplane had gone there, and I don't know if they played for a month, but they had been
They played
successful.
for just 1 week there.
1 week, yeah. So we went to Chicago, and it was you know, really an adventure, and a lot of things happened. I'm not gonna. I mean, it's my book. It's because the thing to me about it, and the reason I always think about this particular time, is because I think everything that happened from the beginning to the end of that was the whole story of Janice and Big Brother and Holding Company. In other words, every element of what happened to her after and what happened to us after, and in some way what happens to all rock bands, how it kind of starts as a love fest, and how it, you know, ultimately becomes a battle of egos toward the end when bands are breaking up. And that's just one element of it, but just a lot of things happened to us. We you know, we were freaks. When we got to Chicago, we all had long hair, and they had never seen anything like that before. And we were harassed on the street. People followed us and yelled threats and stuff like that as we walked around on the street. It was kind of an experience, you know, that you don't have nowadays. Now, all kinds of rednecks have long hair and earrings, but in those days, they didn't, and we did. And they yell things, are you a boy or a girl, you faggot, you know, stuff like that. And
Now, I don't know if this is in your book or not. Can you hear me, by the way?
how-
No, you can't. I tell you what, let's switch
Switch
seats.
sides?
Yeah.
yeah.
He's got better hearing on his right side, so.
From 50 years of rock and roll, this is kind of what happens
So Dave,
your ears.
this is what happened here in Chicago. That's probably not in your book. Well, maybe part of it is.
Okay.
We were told we were going to work there a month, and then after 2 weeks, the guy said, I can't pay you. Can't pay you. Oh, wait a minute. We have a deal. We have a contract. You know? He said, well, I tell you what. You can work here for another couple weeks for the door. Work for the door. So we said, no, that's not right. That's not what the contract says. So we went to the Musicians Union in Chicago. Now, the Musicians Union in Chicago was like, I mean, you know, Bonanno and Vincente. And so we go in there, and the guy says, what do you want? He said, well, we got, I don't know, we want to close this guy down because he's not paying us, or we want you to get money for us. And he said, Mr. Nunzio, can you come over here and talk to these boys here? So this guy comes over, says, Mr. Bonanno, you have this problem with these kids here. I'll try to solve it for you. We'll shut the guy down. And I said, no, don't shut the guy down. We can't get any money at all from this guy. Can you get money from? No, that's not what we do here. We use a different technique.
Yeah, and we didn't get paid for the last 2 weeks.
We had to work for the door.
Curly, who was the manager of the club, said, well, you guys can stick around and play, and we'll see what we can do, you know? Maybe there'll be some money, maybe we'll get some money at the door, you know? And then at the end of like the second, we said, you know, really, I can't give you anything, really. The club's losing money, and you know, and it wasn't lying to us. It wasn't like we were filling the place up. There was very few people coming, and they didn't know what to make of us. They didn't even know what to make of Janice, you know? They just didn't think we were like a blues band or what. What are
We were
these
not a
guys?
blues
What the
band,
hell is
yeah.
this? It was like, you know, psychedelic rock and psychedelic blues in some way, and they didn't. We weren't. Although I have to say, there were, you know, people. There were some people that came. The people who came and kind of became like our audience were devoted.
Fans.
They saw something that was phenomenal to them, and they wanted that. And so we had like groups of certain people, 3 or 4 people, and there was another band in Chicago. There was these guys, the Siegel Schwall Blues Band, and they liked us. They sort of got what we were doing, but we didn't have a lot of people. We didn't have big audience, you know.
Anyway, there's another question over here,
Uh,
and then we'll get to you, okay?
Well, the things I like about her a lot was she was true to herself. True to herself.
Was Janice true to herself?
She was independent.
What?
She was true to herself. She was independent and very talented.
Yeah, what's the question?
What's the question?
The question is, she also had alcoholism and drug addiction, and she passed away at age 27.
We already said that. What's the question?
The question is, well, one of the questions is, what did she die from?
Well, what did she die from?
She died from a heroin overdose. That was the autopsy. That was the coroner's report. She died from a heroin overdose, but she also had a lot of alcohol in her system, and she'd been drinking. But the coroner's report listed as a heroin overdose.
That's what it says in the movie, right?
So she was emotionally out of control, and there was very little self-understanding in her life. I mean, to die at age 27 is, that's pretty young. And so there was some things in her life that were definitely going
Okay.
in not a very good direction.
I kind of agree with you. Let's go back here, this fellow back here.
Yeah, just how was the process of arranging the tunes, you know, from the practice space and then on stage? Was there a lot of discussion? Did it tend to be led by Janice? Was it fairly organic?
How did
Arrange the tunes?
band arrange the tunes? We just rehearsed these songs, and they just came about, you know. Okay, well, let's do 5 verses of this song. Someone said, no, that's too many. Let's do 4 verses. Oh, let's do a couple of choruses, but whatever. You know, it's very organic. It just happens, you know.
It was all, especially in the beginning, the first year and a half we were together, it was definitely a cooperative thing. Each person would suggest ideas. In Ball and Chain, one of the funniest things about it was that Janice and, where did you go?
Myself,
Peter,
and
Janice,
James Shirley.
and I think James
Yeah.
went to hear Big Mama Thornton at a club in San Francisco called the Both And.
The jazz club.
And when Janice came back, I remember the rehearsal like the next day, and she was trying to describe the song, and she said, in the song, it's got these stops. It goes, whoa, 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 da. And you know, so we interpreted it, and we said, okay, we're gonna do this stop time kind of thing there. And that's what she heard. And we played it in a minor key, and that's what she heard. And then, you know, after we arranged that song and played it for a while, we went and listened to the record of Big Mama Thornton singing it, and it wasn't in a minor key, and there were no stops. So again, it's like, you know, it's just she heard right from the beginning the way she heard it. And it wasn't really anything like the way Big Mama Thornton sang the song. But Big Mama Thornton loved the fact that we did the song and made a bunch of money for her, which was great.
She got a black Cadillac for that song. All right, another question
So,
here.
what bands or musicians influenced Big Brother in the early days?
What bands influenced us? A lot of bands.
Yeah,
A lot of bands, yeah.
okay.
You know, one of the bands that influenced us was really kind of strange. Dave was not in the band yet. We went over to a guy's house to listen to the Yardbirds' new record.
Yeah.
And also the Beatles. We listened to a lot of Beatles, and we listened to a lot of R&B. Otis Redding.
The Stones, I think. The first thing I ever played with Big Brother, when I joined, we jammed on a song by a Rolling Stones blues called 2120, and we were playing that. That was part of the repertoire. We did that, and we did a lot of like interpretations of John Lee Hooker. Peter had a couple of John Lee Hooker things. We did a couple of things by Howlin' Wolf, Moaning at Midnight. We tried to do our interpretation, sort of like San Francisco, I guess you'd call it psychedelic interpretation of these Chicago blues things that we'd all kind of come up listening to. And that was a big influence. You know, Little Richard, I think,
Yeah.
influenced Peter a lot. And Chuck Berry, we did a little stuff like that. But we liked the Yardbirds. Yardbirds was one of the bands I remember that James Gurley had in his, you know, listening to a lot.
One of the things that James Gurley did when he was he'd gotten into a monastery and couldn't talk for a long time, he said. So he went back to Detroit and he picked up a guitar and started listening to a lot of John Lee Hooker blues. And supposedly he learned all the songs on a particular record by just listening to it in a closet. He would bring the record player in and listen to this thing for 4 days. I think it was just a retreat for him. So that's kind of like where he came from too, is the Detroit blues.
We did a song by a guy named Moondog. That was one of the things also that was very unusual about Big Brother in the early days, is that there was this guy, he would dress like a Viking, and he would stand on the corner of, I think it was 53rd Street and 6th Avenue in Manhattan. And he was actually a very serious composer. And he was blind. And he had recorded some albums actually for